Van Zandt County
Okay.
today, it's my understanding, agreed to work with the Sledge Law Group. You're joining several other counties across East Texas. What were your thoughts about the discussion?
Well, we've been talking about water conservation districts for over a year. We had many workshops, and we've had people come and make presentations, and we've talked about it. But the only consideration back then was that we have our own county water conservation district, and the cost of doing that, establishing that, was really prohibitive for a single county. And so when this opportunity came about, I felt like, oh, that's great, because we can share the cost and we can share resources between the different counties and all accomplish the same thing.
Why is it important?
Well, and the other thing too, that when we talked about a water conservation district, it was it would have included private wells. In other words, all the homes, all the wells in the county would be considered part of under that regulation. And a lot of our citizens did not want to have any regulation on their property or on their wells. And rightfully so, they said that. And so this particular setup is primary for commercial wells and those that are doing high pumping, and it would not affect the private citizens' wells.
Have you had a chance to speak with, anyone from any of the other counties that have joined this agreement? Can you share any of those discussions?
I was not involved in the initial meeting. Like he pointed out in his video, that it was originally 13 counties that met, Representative Hefner got the county judges together. They had a meeting and about doing this and setting it up, and they contacted the Sledge Law Firm and doing it. And then when the Sledge Law Firm got back to Austin and looked at the map, and he realized that Van Zandt County, Hopkins, and Rains County all were in aquifer, and we were not part of any water conservation district. And so that's when he recommended that they add our 3 counties. So, we immediately jumped board when they asked us to.
How important do you view water conservation efforts here in Van Zandt County?
Well, we've got an aquifer to protect, and we've got the scare stories for Anderson and Cherokee counties when the people came in wanting to drill 25 wells or commercial wells and start pulling out aquifer. Well, that affects everybody. That's when that really came to light that we need to do something to protect our water, because the right to capture right now says anybody in Van Zandt County can drill a well and pump as much water out as they want.
There's been a lot of talk about data centers and their use of water. How do you view, the role of data centers, and how could this groundwater conservation district impact them here in Van Zandt County if they are to build?
Okay, well, we have not had any contact. I'm not aware of any in the planning stages in Van Zandt County, which is, and again, it is our policy that we do not offer abatements, tax abatements to any of these green energy or data centers or those. We're not going to give up taxpayer revenue to help fund them. But yes, I mean, and the water issue has to do with green energy stuff too, that may require, especially for fire protection, and that we've got to have volunteer fire departments, got to have water available to them for servicing the county. So the main thing is that we haven't had to deal with it lately, but what we're trying to do is plan for the future. Of course, you're looking at over a year before we'll know whether or not we'll have a groundwater district, and then another year probably before it gets up and running. So anything can happen between now and then.
Yeah, talk to me a bit about the timeline, just to make sure.
Okay, well, the groundwater conservation district has to be established by the legislature, and that needs to be done in this next legislative session, which ends in June. The governor, if it waits to the end of the legislative session before it gets sent to the governor, then you're looking at July. So, until the bill gets passed and signed, we can't move forward in that regard, other than potentially getting together to establish how we want to operate, what the operation, the methodology in which we want to do our operations and whatnot. So, but again, it's you're not going to start January 28th, January 1st, 28 with a water conservation district. You know, you got to get the people in place, the policies in place, and then you have to start working with the existing wells and stuff. So I'm looking at least 2 years.
Say a groundwater conservation district in northeast Texas is created, how will Zandt County residents be impacted?
Well, it's a long term. It won't affect the residents. It may affect commercial wells, municipalities in that regard. But as far as the residents, it's a way to try to protect their current water levels and keep them from being dropped by having high capacity commercial pumping out of our aquifer.